In this video, we focus on Augustine, a man whose life was as colourful as his ideas. He is remembered as one of Christianity's most influential philosophers and theologians, yet his early life could hardly be described as saintly. Augustine was born in 354 AD in what is now Algeria. As a young man, he was brilliant, charming, and, by his own admission, wild. In his Confessions, he recalls that he lived a life seduced and seducing, deceived and deceiving in various lusts. He enjoyed many a worldly pleasure. At one point he famously prayed, "Lord, grant me chastity and self-control, but not yet." Eventually, Augustine became disillusioned with this lifestyle. Through his study of philosophy and his reading of St. Paul's letters to the Romans, he experienced a dramatic conversion to Christianity. From that point onward, he took on a far stricter moral outlook, what today we might even call puritanical. Having turned away from pleasure himself, he came to believe that others too should renounce worldly indulgence and dedicate their lives to God. Many have seen this as Augustine swinging from one extreme to another, from hedonism to a kind of moral absolutism. After his conversion, Augustine developed a powerful explanation for evil and suffering in the world. He distinguished between two kinds of evil: moral evil, which comes from human choice, things like theft, violence or cruelty, and then natural evil, which comes from events such as earthquakes, disease or famine. Augustine argued that natural evil is ultimately the result of moral evil. When Adam and Eve disobeyed God and ate the forbidden fruit, they distorted the harmony of creation. That first act, known as the fall, introduced disorder into the universe and into human nature itself. Because of what he called original sin, we are all born with a tendency to go astray. At the same time, Augustine insisted that God gave us free will. We can choose good or evil, but since our will is weakened by sin, we often choose wrongly. This raises a troubling question. If God is all-knowing, wouldn't he have known what would happen when he gave us free will? And if so, is he still wholly good? Augustine's answer was that the misuse of free will is humanity's fault, not God's. God created beings capable of love and goodness, and such freedom necessarily allows the possibility of evil. Even suffering, Augustine thought, can serve a purpose. It tests us, humbles us, and can lead us back to God. Whether one finds this convincing or not, his ideas laid the foundation for later Christian discussions of the problem of evil. Philosophically, Augustine inherited much from Plato and the later Neoplatonist thinker Plotinus. Like them, he believed that the soul should rise above bodily desire and seek spiritual truth. However, he rejected Plato's world of forms and replaced it with the Christian vision of a single, personal God who is all-powerful, all-knowing and all-loving. Where Plato saw moral failure as ignorance, Augustine thought people could know what is right and still do wrong. For him, sin is not simply a lack of knowledge. One of Augustine's most remarkable pieces of writing, however, comes in Book 11 of the Confessions, where he reflects on one of philosophy's hardest questions: what is time? It is common enough to ask, what was God doing before the world began? Augustine was obviously aware of this question and answered that before heaven and earth were created, there was no before at all. Time itself began with creation, so it makes no sense to ask what God was doing then, because there was no then. In God, there is no sequence of moments, no yesterday replaced by today, no today giving way to tomorrow. God's existence is an eternal now. When Augustine tried to define time, he confessed, "If no one asks me, I know what it is. But if I try to explain it to someone who asks, I do not know." He noted that time seems to have three parts: past, present and future, yet only the present truly exists. The past is gone, the future not yet arrived. But if the present is just a fleeting instant, can it even be called time at all? Augustine's solution was to place time in the mind rather than in the world. The past lives in memory, the present in perception, and the future in expectation. So instead of 3 times, past, present and future, there are 3 presents. There is the present of things past, and that's the memory. There is the present of things present, that's awareness. And there's the present of things future, and that's anticipation. In this way, Augustine suggested that time exists not as an object, but as an aspect of human consciousness. Augustine ends his reflections by admitting he still does not fully understand time, but his discussion opened one of philosophy's most enduring puzzles. Centuries later, scientists like Stephen Hawking claimed that we still do not truly understand time. We use it constantly, but when asked what time is, we slip into confusion. Augustine's reflections remind us that some of philosophy's most profound questions emerge from the simplest, most familiar aspects of life. Everyday concepts such as time, memory, and expectation, which we normally take for granted, become deeply puzzling the moment we try to define them. This brings us back to a point I made at the start of this series, that language does not function solely by attaching words to things, but often expresses the ways in which we experience the world. Augustine's life tells a story of extremes. A brilliant young man who began as something of a party animal, then found God and became one of history's most rigorous, some might argue self-righteous, moralists. From indulgence to purity, from pleasure to piety, his journey shaped the Christian view of sin, free will, and divine grace. His reflections on time show another side of him, a thinker humble enough to admit that even the greatest minds may never grasp the puzzles with which they wrestle. And perhaps that is Augustine's greatest lesson, that philosophy is not only about answering questions, but about recognizing the nature and form of the questions themselves. Perhaps we lead ourselves astray by asking questions such as, what is time?